Revenge with Karen. I knew the day would go sideways when the Wi-Fi cut out mid-stand-up, and everyone turned to me like I was some kind of digital Jesus. Natalie, fix it, the VP barked, still chewing on his egg white breakfast wrap like he'd earned it by solving world hunger. I didn't answer. Just typed a few lines, reset the load balancer, and watched a room full of Ivy League hires sigh in collective relief like toddlers who'd just found their binkies. No one said thanks. They never did. See, I wasn't hired, I was absorbed. 5 years ago, back when the company ran out of a coffee-stained coworking space and the CEO used Venmo to pay vendors, I was the only one who knew how to get their backend to stop crashing every time someone sneezed on the login page. They didn't have a billing card that worked overseas, so I spun up our AWS under my personal account. Just get us up and running fast, they begged. I did. No contract, no guardrails. Just my name on the account and a prayer that they'd eventually do things the right way. Spoiler, they never did. I built it all. IAM roles, auto-scaling groups, multi-AZ failover, disaster recovery plans, even the duct tape Slackbot that told the engineers when the servers were drunk. Everyone treated me like a glorified janitor, but I was the one who knew which power cords not to kick. Think that kind of institutional memory might earn a raise, or hell, even a thank you coffee. Instead, I got corporate silence and a broken office chair with one wheel that screamed every time I moved an inch. And while we're here, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, now's a good time. 97% of folks listen to these stories without clicking that little button. Toss us a like, hit subscribe. Keeps the team caffeinated and just barely emotionally stable. Anyway, I didn't complain. Not out loud. I fixed. I optimized. I warned them twice that their backups weren't actually versioned and got ignored both times. I was the woman in the server room whispering to the machines like they were feral cats, keeping everything running while the executives played Jenga with quarterly budgets. Every system outage, I patched it before they even knew it happened. Stripe flagged them for a misconfigured webhook. It was me who rerouted traffic. When the CTO accidentally deleted the dev environment because he thought InfraDev East was just clutter, I rebuilt it before he could file the ticket. And when the interns forgot to renew the SSL certs, I got to be the reason we didn't end up on TechCrunch for being that startup. Still, I stayed in the same chair. Same title. Same pay. Guys with PowerPoint decks and zero SSH access got flown to conferences in Cabo to talk about scalability. Me, I just kept typing. Quietly, reliably. Until the day he showed up. The new VP, the Bluster King. The man who didn't know the difference between S3 and EC2 but knew exactly how to talk over a woman mid-sentence. But we'll get to him. For now, I'll just say this. I was the girl who made things work, one who ran toward fire while the rest of them held meetings about fire safety. And the thing about people like me, we notice everything. And when we finally do decide to stop fixing things, the whole place starts to burn. The first time I met him, he called me Nat, like we were old friends. Like I'd ever let a man with gelled hair and a Bluetooth earpiece get that casual. I've heard great things, he lied, his handshake limp and his grin loaded with caffeine and self-congratulation. This was the new VP of engineering, the golden retriever of management hires, all bark and no clue where the ball went. He showed up wearing one of those shirts with execution mode, unprinted across the chest, like a walking LinkedIn post. First week, he hosted a company-wide all-hands titled Raising the Bar, a vision for velocity. Half the engineers rolled their eyes so hard we nearly needed a medic. The other half just minimized Zoom and went back to debugging the product he still hadn't bothered to understand. By week 2, he was already restructuring. Translation: shuffling departments like he was rearranging IKEA furniture without instructions. He moved me, under a junior engineering manager named Arjun, fresh out of his first AWS certification boot camp, and still thinking multi-tenant architecture meant renting 2 apartments. I didn't argue, I just nodded. Because when you've built the foundation, you don't scream when someone tries to decorate it with plastic flamingos. You wait, you watch. You let them believe the walls will hold. The real kicker came during a sprint planning session when Mr. Velocity announced, "I want everyone to focus on value add." He looked at me, only me, and added, "Some of us may need to reevaluate what we're actually contributing." I swallowed so hard I tasted drywall. Miguel, the DevOps lead, caught my eye from across the table. His knuckles were white around his coffee cup. No one else said a word. Not even Arjun, who suddenly looked like he wanted to melt into his chair and respawn elsewhere. I left that meeting with my face numb and my ears hot. Kind of humiliated that doesn't explode. It just simmers low and dark under your ribs. I'd been insulted before. I'd been forgotten, skipped, overlooked. But this was deliberate, performed, a message. And the dumbest part? He didn't even know how close he was standing to the tripwire. 2 weeks in, he still hadn't asked for a single system diagram. Didn't know our AWS root user. Didn't ask who owned our DNS, managed our CI/CD tokens, or who architected our internal APIs. He assumed everything just existed, like servers grew on trees and deployments auto-healed through positive thinking. That's when the seed got planted. Not rage, not revenge. Just the quiet realization that this man had built his throne on a minefield he couldn't see. And I was the one who mapped it. So I smiled, went back to my desk, and updated my flight plan MD. Just a few lines, just in case. They dangled it like a carrot on a fishing line tied to a drone flown by drunk toddlers. Comp reviews coming next quarter, they said in February. Then again in April. By June it was, after this release cycle. The release came and went, along with 3 of my weekends and the last sliver of cartilage in my jaw from grinding through another all-nighter while Arjun asked me how to spell Kubernetes for the 3rd time. Still, I waited. I'd like to say it was patience. Honestly, it was exhaustion dressed up like hope. Hope that maybe, someone upstairs had enough of a spine to look at the Git logs, the Jira board, the uptime charts, and say, yeah, she's earned it. Instead, I got this. An all-hands engineering sync over Zoom, the VP grinning like a man who just figured out how to use the whiteboard feature. Any final thoughts before we wrap? He asked, sipping from a mug that said 10x engineer. My heart hammered. My palms were damp, but I unmuted anyway. Just wondering if there's been any update on the comp review timeline. I kept it polite, flat, practiced. He didn't even blink. No raise, he barked. Not we'll revisit, not let's talk after the call. Just no raise and then a smirk like he just dunked on a heckler courtside. Silence. Not even keyboard clacks. Miguel shifted in his seat. Arjun's camera froze on purpose, I'm sure. I stared at the screen, that little green frame around my face like a digital spotlight. I nodded, just once. Then I clicked leave meeting. Didn't say a word in Slack. Didn't answer Miguel's WTF ping. Just opened terminal, entered the path to my encrypted backup drive, and unlocked a file I hadn't touched in 4 years. Flight Plan MD, it wasn't revenge porn. It wasn't even sabotage. It was insurance. Line by line, who owned what, which services pointed where. How to cleanly exit without breaking everything, unless, of course, you wanted to. The first time I wrote it, we were 3 people working off folding tables with laptops overheating like waffle irons. I built the infrastructure on my account because we didn't have a corporate card that worked. We'll migrate it later, they promised. They never did, so I wrote this file, just in case. And now, a case had arrived, wearing a smug polo shirt and screaming about value add while I kept the company's heart beating through caffeine and code. I took a long breath, clicked save, and somewhere deep down, something clicked off inside me. Not rage, not even grief, just the permission I needed to stop fixing things. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, but because the stillness felt surgical. My mind wasn't spinning. It was sorting, kind of clarity that settles in right before a power outage, when the fridge hum dies and the whole world just listens. Step 1, credentials. I logged into the AWS Management Console at 2:14 a.m. The root account still bore my name, my email, my billing info. Has since 2018, when the CEO begged me to just get us live. I'd asked a dozen times to migrate it to corporate. Nobody ever followed up, so I started moving, quietly, not deleting, not wiping, just rearranging. First, I created 2 new IAM groups, one for visibility, one for decoys. Gave them read-only access and slapped on labels like prod admin override and core services owner. Looked official, felt real, totally empty. Then came the billing console. I updated the linked bank account to a business checking card tied to my LLC, Natalie Infra Solutions, filed 3 years ago when I thought I'd freelance. Tax write-off turned corporate Trojan horse. Ain't that poetic? By 3:40 a.m., every active service, RDS, EC2, Route 53 Lambda, was cross-checked, exported, and documented in a new offline repo called Archive Phoenix. Password protected, time-stamped, encrypted 3 times over. Next, notifications. I rerouted the Cloud Watch alerts to my Proton Mail. Not out of malice, just in case someone panicked and tried to pull the plug. I needed to know what they broke before they did. Day 2, lunchtime. I sat through Arjun's stand-up while exporting the last ownership logs under the table. Natalie, could you recap our infrastructure visibility layer? He asked, like I was still playing the same game. I nodded and said, we're good, fully covered. That wasn't a lie. Final move came that evening. A legal request to AWS to update the root account's ownership to reflect the LLC as the controlling entity. You can't transfer root access directly, but you can change the legal identity associated with the account if the email and billing match, which, surprise, they did. They'd let a live system run on one person's name for 5 years without once asking who had the keys. So I took the keys and locked the glove box. Didn't touch the engine, just made sure I was the only one with the ignition chip. Every step had a log. Every log had a backup, and every backup had a line that ended with only active pushed. They didn't notice. Of course they didn't. People like that only look up when the lights go out. And mine were still on. I waited until the office got quiet, real quiet. That weird post-lunch lull when even Slack goes silent, and you can hear Arjun's mouse wheel scrolling like a hamster on benzos. That's when I pinged Miguel. DM me, you free for 5, off the record. His reply came in under 10 seconds. DM Miguel, always. Miguel was the kind of guy who never asked stupid questions like, can't we just restart it? He knew. He'd been there from the early days, back when our CI pipeline was a bash script duct taped to a Jenkins box in Oregon. He respected uptime. He respected silence. And more importantly, he respected me. We met in one of the unmonitored Zoom huddles, no camera, no recordings. Just a black screen and trust, forged in shared battle against memory leaks and junior PMs with ideas. I'm not planning anything dramatic. I started, voice flat, like I was reading terms and conditions. Let's say, hypothetically, my access were removed. Miguel didn't speak, but I could hear the intake of breath on the other end. Their entire infrastructure, I continued, is balanced on permissions I architected. The root account is legally tied to my LLC now. No one's noticed, yet. A long pause. Then, finally, they revoke you, he said, low and careful, and they'll be flying blind through a thunderstorm, with a paper map, in a language they can't read. Exactly. I said, so I need you to have a plan. For them, for me. I sent him a zipped folder. Password was our old staging environment's original codename, Cactus Fire. Inside, one file. Shutdown checklist txt. It was short, brutally elegant. Just 5 bullet points. Lock all IAM roles that aren't in whitelist conf. Disable Route 53 failover for non-critical services. Initiate S3 lifecycle purge for unused dev buckets. Cut CI/CD tokens from pipeline C. Pause everything for 12 hours, only if they push. The final line in bold, don't act unless they push. Miguel read it in silence. Then, understood, no need for drama, no need for fire, just gravity. The kind of quiet weight that makes people flinch without knowing why. Before we ended the call, I asked one more thing. You okay being the middleman if they come running? Only if you promise not to blow it all up. I chuckled, dry, exhausted. I'm not trying to blow it up, Miguel. I just want them to finally feel the heat I've been absorbing for 5 goddamn years. He didn't argue. He just said, you always were the firewall. When we hung up, I leaned back and stared at the ceiling fan until it blurred. This wasn't revenge. It was a contingency plan wrapped in silence. And like any good backup, you pray you never have to use it. Friday, 11:03 a.m. The subject line hit like a feather, not a freight train. Administrative access temporary suspension for review. One of those HR-coded nothings, wrapped in passive voice and faux concern. As part of a routine evaluation, your elevated credentials have been disabled pending further assessment. Right, routine, like a root canal in the middle of a meal. I didn't scream, didn't slam a desk. Just stared at the screen, the corners of my mouth twitching in something that might have been a smirk or a stroke. A moment later, Slack chimed. VP Engineering, again, no raise. I'm done talking about this. No greeting, no explanation. Just that, like he was swatting a fly, not gutting the only person who kept his AWS from looking like a Jackson Pollock painting made of YAML and failure. I hovered over the keyboard for 3 full seconds and typed exactly 1 character. White heavy checkmark, no sarcasm. No clapbacks. No 14-paragraph Slack thread with citations and links to every system I built. Just white heavy checkmark, and that was the moment. The keystroke that shifted tectonic plates. At 11:07 a.m., I opened my encrypted console and began the final sequence, a multi-layered credential rotation across all primary AWS zones. DNS records reassigned. MS keys relocked. Billing chain rerouted. 11:09 a.m. I confirmed legal documentation was successfully processed. AWS now recognized Natalie InfraSolutions LLC as the primary entity tied to the root account. 11:11 a.m. I severed all inactive user roles and replaced them with spoofed entries bearing familiar names, except these accounts didn't do anything, like scarecrows in an empty field. 11:14 a.m. I generated an immutable audit log and sent a backup to 2 cloud vaults and an encrypted USB key sitting in a drawer beneath 3 expired takeout menus and a screwdriver I never returned. 11:17 a.m. The console pinged. Root transfer confirmed. And just like that, the company's entire infrastructure legally existed under the umbrella of my dusty little LLC. Same company they once mocked when I expensed a $12 domain name for future consulting. I closed the lid on my laptop and sat very still. No adrenaline, no triumph, just a quiet hum inside my ribs where the rage used to live. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. Somewhere down the block, a leaf blower howled to life like a banshee late for therapy. The world kept spinning. They didn't know it yet, but the clock had started ticking. 11:18 a.m. Miguel's message hit like a lit match dropped on gasoline. Hey, AWS console's root user just changed. Should I turn everything off? That was it. No context, no panic. Just a digital shrug wrapped in thermite. I was already logged out by then, closed my laptop, made tea. Jasmine, loose leaf. Steeped exactly 3 minutes. I watched the steam rise, while that message made its silent rounds in the background like a virus nobody vaccinated for. The VP didn't respond immediately. I know this because Miguel later showed me the screen recording. Yeah, he records everything, just in case management starts shedding blame like snakeskin. It showed the VP staring at Slack like it had personally insulted his lineage. First confused, then squinting, calling over IT like a medieval king asking his court wizard to explain why the stars looked weird tonight. Wait, what's root user mean? The VP asked. You could almost hear Miguel's soul leave his body. The internal IT guy, Kevin, God bless his overpaid, under-equipped heart, just shook his head and mumbled, that's like the main admin or whatever, which is like saying the ignition key starts the car or something while the brake lines are already snipped. Meanwhile, Slack started pinging like a microwave full of forks. Product lead. Anyone else having issues with staging? Data analyst. Why can't I access the RDS dashboard? Design intern. Hey, does anyone know what a credentials rotation log is and why it just got emailed to me? The VP, once bragged that he didn't need to understand AWS to lead innovation, panicked. Told Kevin to log into the console. Kevin tried. He couldn't. The MFA prompt now pointed to a hardware key no one had, because that hardware key was in my apartment, next to the Jasmine tea. I didn't message anyone. I didn't call. I didn't gloat. I just sat cross-legged on my floor with a mug in my hand, listening to the dull throb of urban life and the subtle, growing tremble of an empire built on assumption. I didn't want to blow it up. I just wanted to see if they'd realize they were flying without a parachute. Spoiler, they didn't, not yet. But Miguel, he had the ripcord in his hand, and he was waiting. By Monday morning, the building smelled like stale fear and burnt Keurig pods. The CTO scheduled an emergency all-hands for 9 o'clock a.m. Subject line, urgent, system access issues. Could practically hear the blood pressure spiking through the invite. They'd spent the whole weekend trying to brute force comm. Kevin swore the backup admin credentials should work. Problem was, the root user no longer recognized their existence. MFA token, invalid. Recovery email, belonged to a domain they didn't control. Billing alerts, routed to alerts at Natalie InfraSolutions.com. The console was still alive. Nothing was offline yet. No one could say for sure how long that would last. The infrastructure was stable, but their grasp on it was not. They were standing on a floor they no longer owned. At 9:26 a.m., I got the email, plain white background, blue serif font, polite as a toothless threat. Hi Natalie, hope you're doing well. We wanted to open a conversation around the AWS account ownership situation and explore a smooth transition path back to company control. Please let us know if you're open to a dialogue. Warm regards, Jennifer from Legal. Warm regards. Like I just borrowed a lawn chair and forgot to return it, instead of holding the keys to their entire digital kingdom. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Subject line: let the games begin. He responded within the hour with a 2-word text: timestamp. I sent over everything. Logs, documentation, the legal receipt confirming the LLC transfer, archived emails from the CEO practically begging me to get us up and running fast back in 2018. And of course, flight plan MD. Meanwhile, internally, things got sloppier by the second. Miguel told me discreetly that DevOps had spent the entire weekend combing through infrastructure trying to find access points I hadn't touched. Every corner they turned led to a dead end or worse, a dependency chained to a personal account. Twilio, DNS hosting, auth provider keys. Even the SSL certificates pointed back to services I'd registered years ago and renewed annually without thanks. Their Slack exploded with threads like, #prod emergency, who owns the AWS account? Why is billing in a different name? Did we ever migrate from Natalie's original setup? I thought legal was handling that 2 years ago no one had answers. Only questions, stacked like Jenga blocks ready to collapse if someone breathed too hard. And I was on my 3rd cup of coffee, still in sweatpants, watching seagulls dive bomb trash behind my apartment building. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like gravity had finally taken over. The systems I built were sound. What was crumbling was them, their assumptions, their arrogance, their house of cards balanced on invisible labor and willful ignorance. Thought they could clip my wings and keep flying. Turns out I was the wings. The reply took me 10 minutes to draft, 5 years to earn. I kept it clean. Sharp, surgical. Dear Jennifer, thank you for your inquiry. I am open to negotiating access terms for the AWS infrastructure, currently under the legal and administrative control of Natalie, Infra Solutions, LLC. Please find attached a draft service lease agreement. Monthly fee includes continued infrastructure availability, system maintenance, and a retroactive compensation adjustment equal to the raise I was denied, plus interest. Clause 4.2. All future personnel decisions affecting system architects must be reviewed and approved by legal counsel, effective immediately. Best regards, Natalie. I hit send. Within 24 hours, the VP's calendar went mysteriously blank. By Thursday, his Slack icon vanished entirely. No farewell post, no moving on to exciting new opportunities, just gone. Like someone finally realized that a man who couldn't explain the difference between root access and root vegetables shouldn't be in charge of infrastructure. The CEO reached out privately that evening. Not with bluster, not with spin. Just a message with 6 words: I'm sorry, you were the system. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't appreciate it, because there was nothing else to say. Miguel, promoted, rightfully, deservedly. CTO track, full control over DevOps, and rumor has it, a corner office with an actual window. And me? I boarded a red-eye to Cholum with a laptop, a VPN, and a draft manuscript called How to Build with Grace and Exit with Fire. The beach is quiet here. The kind of quiet I used to chase in server rooms at 2 a.m., when everything was humming and nothing was breaking. I didn't scorch the earth, didn't crash a single service, didn't touch their product, their data, their revenue. I just closed the gates I built and waited for them to realize I held the keys the whole time. That's the thing about silent power. It doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It doesn't need applause. It just walks away and lets the silence speak. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.